Family Misadventures, Book 6, Chapter 1, Better Than Friends. Maddie heard the doorbell ring twice from the kitchen as she was preparing the coffee maker and yawned as she went to answer it.
Come in.
It was dark and cold outside, very early in the morning. Wade was standing there, Silver and his plush in his arms, Shadow in front of him, both blinking tiredly in the light from the porch. The most amusing thing was neither hedgehog was wearing their shoes, and they were both carrying them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I packed them a lunch.
He held it out to her and then turned towards his kids.
Be good. I love you both. I'll see you this afternoon.
Maddie had known Wade for a while, always thought of him as Tom's well-meaning but kinda clueless coworker. The night before, he had called in a near panic because the girl who usually washed them was sick, and Maddie had agreed to wash them for a day. She had never thought he could be passionate about anything, until he found out that he loved being a father more than anything else in the world. Who knew the man who could take forever to make a decision and everything made him anxious was actually capable of being fiercely protected when it came to those two boys.
Also, Tom told me to tell you that you're late no matter what time you drop them off.
She told him as he kissed both on the top of their heads. The look that came over Wade's face as he saw her a quick scowl was pretty funny.
Don't worry about us.
She said with yawn and a wave of her hand.
We'll be fine.
She shut the door after he said goodbye again and a moment later heard the rumble of Wade's car as he drove away. Maddie looked down at the two half-asleep hedgehogs in front of her. Both looked a bit ragged, their quills and fur in mild disarray, like they had literally been pulled out of bed and bundled into the car right after. It was cute to see even alien hedgehogs got bedheads sometimes.
All right, boys, let's get you back to bed.
She said and led them to the living room where she tucked both under blankets on opposite sides of the couch.
I'll see you two in a few hours. Oh, Sonic doesn't know you're here, so when we get up, you two can be a surprise to him.
Neither said anything, which was fine. She preferred that they wanted to go back to sleep instead of bouncing off the walls before it was even 6 a.m. Maddie went back to the bedroom she shared with her husband and slipped back under the warm covers, hoping the boys will let her sleep until at least 8 a.m. Shadow would have preferred to keep sleeping, but when the sunlight started streaming in the windows, it made it impossible. Even with the blanket pulled over his head, it was still way too bright. When he had been very little, the lab had been extremely dark, and now that was the conditions he needed to sleep. Setting up carefully not to wake his brother, Shadow peered around the living room. He had only been in the Wachowskis' house briefly before, never for long periods of time. It was quite different from theirs back home. He wished he was back home. That morning, their dad had woken them up extremely early, long before the sunrise, to say they'd been staying with Maddie and Sonic today, as Melissa was sick. When they hadn't been moving fast enough for him, he simply just picked them up and carried them to the car. Shadow was just wondering what he was supposed to do until everyone else woke up. When he heard a noise from the kitchen, he paused, staring in the direction before he glanced at his little brother, who was still sleeping, cuddled against that plush toy he loved. Whatever made that sound wasn't going to hurt anyone while they were asleep, not while Shadow was awake. Slowly, Shadow lowered himself off of the couch and crept towards it. He barely made his way out of the living room and around the corner when he almost walked directly into a hairy golden thing and gasped. Whatever it was almost bigger than him. Lots of fur, a long tongue that hung out of its mouth, and ruby brown eyes. As soon as it saw him, it got excited and started trying to lick him. Shadow threw his hands up to protect his face, trying to push it away.
Stop.
Hey, Ozzy.
There were footsteps behind him, and a hand reached over to grab the creature by some neck curb and tugged it away from him. Curious, Shadow watched with interest as Tom pulled that animal, apparently that was the Ozzy he had heard about, toward the door and made it go outside. The human shut the door quickly and then turned around.
You alright?
He nodded once.
Oh, good. You look a bit haggard, but that might be just from the lack of brushing.
Tom headed back to the kitchen and started to fuss around with several items on the counter.
Is Silver still asleep?
Shadow nodded again as he quickly smoothed down the wildest part of his fur with his fingers. It had been a few days since last time he brushed his pelt, but he didn't have a comb with him at the moment. Grooming with his hands would have to do.
I didn't catch that.
Inwardly, Shadow huffed as he knew that was something Wade had told him to say in an attempt to get him to talk. This was the one thing he wasn't looking forward to. Being at the Wachowskis' house meant he would have to talk to both Tom and Maddie. He swallowed deeply once, then twice, before he managed to get the word out.
Yes.
The smile he got from Tom was warm.
You want some breakfast?
And then suddenly, the man turned his body so his ear was facing him, silently asking for words, not a nod.
Sure.
Great.
Tom made a motion towards the counter, where 3 large stools were tucked up against them. Patting over, Shadow stared upward for a moment as all of them were taller than he was before he climbed up and made himself comfortable. Instantly, he had a much better view of the kitchen, and he could actually see over the counters. He could see what Tom was doing as he opened and closed the refrigerator, pulling out several items.
Pancakes okay with you?
Yeah.
Shadow continued to watch as the man mixed ingredients in a bowl as he took out some pans. Suddenly, Tom stopped and turned to face him.
Everything okay?
The hedgehog blinked.
You're staring at me like I grew another head while I was asleep.
Too late, Shadow remembered that humans dislike staring and slowly lowered his gaze.
It
felt like the words were lost somewhere in the sea of his chest, and that he had to personally find and tuck each one free, up through his throat before he could say it. Far more difficult than when he was speaking to people he knew and was relaxed around.
Why are you here?
Tom stopped halfway through, pouring the batter into a pan on the stove.
I live here?
Frustrated, Shadow squeezed his eyes shut. That wasn't what he meant. He knew Tom and Maddie lived here. Now that he just sounded stupid, and even though Tom was wearing the same uniform as his dad, he was still in his house, and Shadow was curious as to why he hadn't gone to work yet.
No, I.
Hey, it's okay.
Tom made a motion towards the counter, where 3 large stools were tucked up against them. Patting over, Shadow stared upward for a moment as all of them were taller than he was before he climbed up and made himself comfortable. Instantly, he had a much better view of the kitchen, and he could actually see over the counters. He could see what Tom was doing as he opened and closed the refrigerator, pulling out several items. Tom lit the pancakes he had already poured and took a step toward him.
Just breathe and think about what you want to ask. It's alright, you don't have to get worked up. We've talked before. I'm not going to bite your head off.
Shadow knew that, and yet, it didn't make it any easier. He still remembered the first time he had ever spoken, back when he was still a young hoglet. The scientists were going to do some new experiment and were securing his body when he yanked away, crying out for them to stop. And they had, because they were so shocked. They proceeded to spend the next day trying to make him talk again. He hadn't been able to physically speak for almost 4 days after that. He hated being the center of attention and having people stare at him like he was a freak of nature, especially strangers or those he didn't know very well. It made the words in his mouth shrivel up and disappear. Where they went, he didn't know, but it always took a long time for them to return. Tom looked concerned.
Is it really that hard for you to talk to people?
Yes.
Shadow admitted. Looking back, he was really glad that Wade had met Silver and Sonic before he met him. If Wade had shown him a lot of attention or had been shocked or surprised, it would probably have made things a lot more difficult. The fact that he had stayed calm and hadn't treated him like a big deal had been very helpful. Not to mention, Silver and Sonic were there, so Wade's attention had been split, not deeply focused on him until he felt more comfortable later on.
Okay, I'll just cook over here and give you some space.
Tom took a step back. Honestly, that was probably the best thing Tom could have done for him, and it instantly made Shadow feel better, more relaxed, as it removed the pressure. He spent a few minutes taking deep breaths, trying to relax, thinking about what he wanted to say.
How come you're not at work?
I'll be leaving for that soon. That's the best part of being sheriff. I can come in a little later if I want to make breakfast for my family first.
There was something about that statement that was really kind to hear. Shadow knew that he and Silver were not part of the family like Sonic was, and yet it still seemed like they were being included with that one sentence, like being an extra family.
Hey, buddy.
Tom suddenly said, and Shadow twisted around to see Silver behind them, still clutching his toy and rubbing at his eyes.
You want pancakes?
Yeah,
Silver answered, climbing up to sit next to Shadow and set his toy on the edge of the counter.
I like your stuffed animal. What's its name?
he doesn't have one.
Silver explained, running his hand over the ridges on his plushie's back.
I didn't know you're supposed to name them, and I've just been calling him my plush all this time.
You could still name him.
The gray hedgehog shrugged.
I don't know, I've always just called him my plush, but I can tell you he's a boy.
Alright, and you're sure.
Tom said as Maddie walked into the kitchen, already dressed for the day.
Hi, honey.
He said and kissed her tenderly.
Hope you want pancakes.
That sounds nice.
She then glanced at the two of them.
How did you guys sleep?
I slept good. Is Sonic going to get up soon?
Maddie rolled her eyes upward and then smiled.
Hopefully soon. If not, you two can give him the surprise of a lifetime in a minute.
Shadow thought that would be pretty interesting to just wake up to your friends being there, not even aware that they were over at your house in the first place. Also possibly scary, especially if they came right to your bed. That was the worst part about sleeping, knowing how vulnerable you were. Next to him, Silver spoke up again.
Maddie, how come you were wearing that scarf on your head this morning?
She took several plates out of the cupboard and gave them each one.
It protects and helps manage my hair while I'm asleep, so it doesn't break.
She explained it and then set a third plate in front of the empty seat with a grin.
Oh, look at that.
All of them heard Sonic's voice before they saw him.
Donut Lord, do you think that Silver? Shadow?
Shadow blinked, wondering who this Donut Lord was as he took a bite of his pancake that had been put in front of him and chewed it.
Hi, Sonic.
What are you guys doing here?
Suddenly, the blue hedgehog was perched on the stool next to Silver, beaming at them.
Did you get lost? Does Wade know you're here? He didn't kick you out, did he? Ooh, pancakes.
They're hanging out with us today while their dad is at work.
Speaking of work,
Tom sighed as he dished the last pancake up onto a plate and picked up his cup of coffee.
I have to get to it.
Leaning over, he kissed Maddie again before straightening up.
Be good for your mother.
He said to the three of them and then stopped.
I mean, I'm used to saying that to Sonic, but be good for Maddie.
He said before turning and leaving the house. Shadow turned towards Sonic.
Who's Donut Lord?
Oh, that was Tom.
He's really the Lord of Donuts, although I don't know how he managed to do that.
Okay, you three, eat your breakfast.
She said, pouring herself another cup of coffee. None of that really made sense to Shadow, but he had learned a long time ago to just nod and listen. He quietly ate, listening to the conversation swirl around him. It was one thing he liked a lot about Sonic. He didn't have to worry about trying to find something to say. The blue hedgehog was more than happy to carry the conversation. As soon as he was finished eating, Sonic pushed his empty plate away and jumped down.
Come on up to my room. I'll show you my new comics.
Plates in the dishwasher, boys.
Maddie instructed, turning her back towards them as she started cleaning up the kitchen. Carefully jumping down from that tall stool, Shadow did as she instructed, and then followed the other two hedgehogs out of the kitchen and down the hallway.
You've never seen my room, have you, Shadow?
Shadow shook his head and stopped as they came to some vertical obstacle. Sonic scrambled up it right away, and Silver just used his powers to float up. But Shadow stood at the bottom and stared upward.
What's this?
Sonic peered down at him.
Stairs? Come on up.
Looking around for a moment, Shadow slowly put one foot on the first rung and then started climbing. About halfway, he shut his eyes and kept going until he suddenly bumped into something, stumbled, and then a hand grabbed his arm, dragging him up the last few inches until he was back on solid ground. When he opened his eyes, he found himself staring directly at Sonic.
You've never seen stairs before?
No, we don't have stairs.
That's weird.
Shadow got back to his feet and did a double take, looking around where he was. It was huge, a lot bigger than the room he and Silver shared, and it was full of stuff.
This is your room?
Grinning, Sonic flopped down on what looked like a mound that could be molded into different shapes.
Yeah, I used to have a cave, but now I live here.
He gave both of them a tour, going through all the items he had up there, from his race car bed to all the decorative items. A lot of it Shadow didn't recognize, but it did give him some ideas for what they could do with their bedroom back home.
And the coolest part is I can leave without having to use the front door.
He finished pointing up at the big round window on the ceiling. Next to him, Silver tilted his head back to properly appreciate that.
Whoa!
Beaming, Sonic threw himself onto the floor on his belly, and both Shadow and Silver followed suit. So the three of them were lying propped up on their elbows and chins in hands, looking at each other.
Do you ever want to go back home?
Shadow frowned, knowing what the blue hedgehog meant.
No, this is home, even with all the humans.
Do you ever think humans are weird?
Sometimes. They're pretty cool sometimes, but yeah, also weird. They don't wear gloves, but they wear other clothes? So weird. Why wouldn't they want to protect their hands, especially since they sometimes eat with their bare hands?
And they love taking showers and baths so much that they're offended by the smallest amount of dirt or mud. It's okay not to smell like soap for one day.
I don't like how tall they are. I wish they were shorter, or we were taller. That makes things really hard sometimes.
I wish. It would be nice to be taller for once and not super short.
His smile dropped, his expression became serious.
You guys like your dad, right?
Shadow nodded right away, thinking of all the nice things Wade has done for them, how he never yelled or made either of them feel scared, and how he understood when Shadow didn't feel like giving or receiving hugs, and just wanted some space. After living in the lab with the professor and the other scientists, Wade was much nicer.
Yeah, he's a good dad.
Even though he has lots of rules. He's good though. I'm glad we have him.
Suddenly, Silver leaned forward.
Do you guys ever feel like because it's just the three of us, we're kind of like family?
We are family.
No, I mean like with Sonic. There's no other hedgehogs or anyone else on this planet. It's just the three of us, you know?
Yeah, I got you. We're like cousins. Even though your dad's not related to either my dad or mom. Well, maybe he can be like my dad's little brother.
Why does he have to be the little brother?
Because I said so.
Shadow pondered over the strange word. He had never heard of it before.
Cousins?
Yeah, it's when your parents and my parents are siblings, which they kinda are. Or we can just say they are and never tell them. We decided this, but tell everyone else we're cousins. Or they would just think we're related to each other as hedgehogs and not through the humans.
You can just do that?
It sounds nice. I want to.
Yeah, I guess if we all want it, then yes.
Rolling over onto his back, Shadow thought about that for a moment. How Tom had said something similar when he was cooking pancakes. A few months ago, the black hedgehog would have never imagined having a family. He always thought he would have been alone forever. That he was the only one in the world, and other humans would never accept him. But that had been wrong, as now he has a little brother and a dad, and now an extended family with a cousin.
Okay.
Suddenly, Silver shot to his feet, full of excitement.
Oh, I just remembered. Sonic, we gotta teach Shadow.
Teach Shadow?
Yeah, there were no hedgehogs around when he was little, and he doesn't know certain stuff that's important, and he might need to know in the future. Our dad said you and I can teach him.
The other hedgehog jumped up as well.
That's a great idea.
Shadow sat up.
I thought we were going to read comments.
We can do that later. Come on, we've got lots to teach you.
And that was how Shadow found himself outside standing between the two of them, 20 minutes later.